Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the AM Report, perhaps news, the network of now. I'm Alex Mahajer, and this morning, how do you say lost in French? It's Purdue, and we've got two apparent victories by the Democrats in Georgia this morning in the special Senate runoff elections. David Perdue and Senator Kelly Loeffler both seem to have lost their races to Reverend Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff. We're going to be talking about that this morning with none other than investigative journalist Greg Palast, who's been on the ground in Georgia exposing the ongoing voter suppression that's happening in that state. We're going to discuss the election results and cover this morning's top headlines, all of this and more on the AM Report. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the AM Report. I'm Alex Mahajer. It is Wednesday, January 6th, and my God, at long last, we've got some clarity here on what's going to happen in America. We've got two victories, really shock victories, in a state that just years ago you would have thought it'd be impossible, but Georgia has delivered for Democrats. Joe Biden has now two incoming Democratic senators who will give him control of the U.S. Senate. Those Democrats are Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock, and it's insane, really. But my mind's blown, but it's very exciting. We'll be joined in just a minute by Greg Palast, an investigative journalist, but we do have a lot of comments chiming in. Blessings from Florida, says Joseph. Good morning. Good morning, Shivani Prasad from Brooklyn, and Pablo de la Hoya in LA, and Chris in Denver, and Mark in LA, and Chris Wingard says so happy, and he's giving lots of emojis. It's an emoji morning, everybody. Looking forward to speaking with Greg Palast this morning. We do have a few headlines to cover before we get into it. First and foremost, yes, indeed, Democrats will win control of the United States Senate. Say it with me, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, if they even decide to keep him. Not all media outlets are calling the race, but Democrat Reverend Warnock has been projected to defeat Senator Kelly Loeffler for sure, while Jon Ossoff is projected to have defeated Senator Perdue by some media outlets, but not all. Decision Desk is one of the outlets that has called the race. Dave Wasserman called the races last night early, and we were all chewing our fingernails off in anticipation, but it appears there are not enough votes for Perdue to win. Here we go. Congress is going to meet today in a joint session to certify the election results. Senate and House Republicans are planning to object to certifying Biden the winner, but the move is mostly likely to be nothing but political theater. I'll note Vice President Mike Pence does not have the power to overturn the election. His constitutional authority is merely to count the votes. Trump supporters, however, are meeting in Washington, D.C. today to cause a little bit of chaos. The maggots are not going down without a fight. Law enforcement officers, numbered in the hundreds, have mobilized in D.C. to kind of fight back against what appears to be, in some instances, violent protests by Trump supporters who are they're protesting Joe Biden's presidential victory. They're not going to let this one go. And shocking, the coup moves down ballot. Pennsylvania Republicans are attempting one of their own in a state Senate race there. Pennsylvania Senate Republicans are refusing to seat Democrat Jim Brewster, who was elected to the state Senate in November due to a lawsuit brought by his defeated rival. Her name is Nicole Ziccarelli, an Allegheny County Republican. And because the Senate Republicans hold control of that chamber, they're just refusing to seat the Democrat who won. And that's sort of Trumpism at its finest. Thank you, Donald Trump, for the legacy you've left behind. I'd like to welcome to the program Greg Palast. Greg, good morning. How are you?
Exhausted and in Atlanta. And I got to tell you, it's not a victory for the Democrats at all.
Okay.
This is a victory against Jim Crow. And that's why we're here. I'm not partisan. If you go to gregpalast.com, by the way, you can see the stories. I just had a story on a program, Democracy Now! Yesterday, on the vicious Jim Crow operation. This victory is only surprising, not because it's been called, the media calls it a narrow victory. That's nonsense. Ossoff, Warnock won by landslides. But you're talking about a massive, massive Jim Crow operation, and this headed by Brian Kemp, the governor, and Brad Raffin's Perjure, which is really his name. It's not Berger. Raffin's Perjure is really his name, who I've sued in federal court. These people have done everything they could on this planet to fix this vote against the public. We sued in federal court. I say we. I mean the Palace Fund. I have the Greg Palast Investigative Fund is a foundation I have. We're nonpartisan. I just want people to vote. The state removed 198,351 people. If you don't worry about writing down that name, just round the 200,000 voters were removed from the voter rolls illegally. They said they'd left Georgia, including Martin Luther King's 94-year-old cousin. This woman has been voting in the same place for 50 years. They knocked her off the voter roll saying she'd left Atlanta. Really? I went to her house in Atlanta. There was a picture of King on the wall. She'd been in this house 60 years because if there's the picture is of Dr. King in her home having dinner with her. So they had to be 60 years old, unless she photoshopped it. I don't think she did. And I got to tell you, so the result is about voters winning, voters choosing our Senate. It's not a victory for the Democrats. I mean, obviously, they pick up the spoils. And I got to tell you, the Democratic Party didn't do a damn thing here. This was a victory for voters led by Black Voters Matter, led by Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight, led by groups you probably haven't heard of, like the Transformative Justice Coalition, which had votercades of Black and Hispanic voters, led by the massive team of lawyers, Jeannie Meyer of New York, and the head of the National Bar Association, C.K. Hoffler, Gerald Griggs of Atlanta, usually represents the NAACP, who got voters on the rolls, who fought the Jim Crow tactics, and we ain't done. I'm going to tell you something. John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock owe us, and I'm very serious. And what I'm going to collect, I wasn't there to elect a Democrat or to elect Ossoff. I was there to let the voters choose, and they got to make sure that stays. And that
the voters
passing laws that they will stand up and demand that the Democrat Party, which has nothing to do with this victory for the people, that the Democratic Party pass laws to prevent these Jim Crow operations, these massive erasure of Black voters from the voter rolls, the closure of voting stations, you name it. And we need an attorney general. Joe Biden better give us an attorney general who's going to protect the voters in the way that frankly, Barack Obama didn't. I didn't expect a lot of protection from Donald Trump, but we never got it from Obama. And it's time that we have an attorney general and an administration and a U.S. Senate that says Jim Crow will not return. That's it.
And I think, Greg, although, yes, you're right, it's not just a victory for Democrats. It's a victory for democracy, and you're right about that. Although I'll note that this victory does give Democrats the Senate majority, and bills like H.R. 1, which was the first bill that was passed in Congress in 2018 when Democrats retained control of that chamber, obtained control of that chamber. That bill is a Voting Rights Act. It's a new voting rights law, and that can now come before the Senate. Mitch McConnell has blocked those kinds of pieces of legislation for the last couple of years. He won't even let it come to the floor. So you're right. Now that they are elected, it's our job as citizens to put their feet to the fire to do what we put them there to do. I want to point out the results this morning in the Ossoff race. It looks like there's right now just a slight victory, just about 9,000 votes or so in the Ossoff race, and Decision Desk has called that race for John Ossoff. And in the Warnock case, the Warnock election, we've got here a bit more of a substantial victory. We're talking about nearly 50,000 votes in the Warnock race. Greg, you have been on the ground in Georgia for some time, and you've been there for at least the last few days, and working on a new short film exposing the voter suppression tactics that have been ongoing. You mentioned that in your previous answer that Jim Crow laws were defeated, but doesn't mean that they didn't continue trying. I want to play a little clip for our viewers about an interview you did in Cobb County about the early voting center closures. If you don't mind, let's watch that for just a second and then talk about it.
They didn't cut one white polling site.
People were saying they were waiting an hour and a half. What happened here in Cobb County?
They cut from 11 voting places during the general election down to 5 for the runoff, knowing that during the general election they had 3-hour lines with 11 places.
I came here to early vote, as this is where I came to early vote for the presidential election, and then I found out this place was closed. So looks like I'll be trying to go to another location at some point.
And they knew that it was going to result in long lines. And they have done nothing to help voters. They cut places knowing that they would make it harder for people to get to the polling places. But look at where they cut them, Greg. They didn't cut one white polling site. They cut all of the polling sites they cut were black and brown polling sites predominantly.
Was that just an accident?
No.
Come on, Barbara.
No, it was targeted. It's what we call targeted voter suppression. And it's wrong because they knew that it would make it harder for people to get to these sites. They knew it was going to result in long A lines. They knew this, but they did it anyway.
No, I didn't hear about the closures. I imagine it will deter some people. You know, I imagine some people probably made some plans to go early vote on a specific day.
So, Greg, incredible work. Will you talk about what you found there on the ground in Georgia and the difference between voter fraud and voter suppression and why one is actually facilitating the execution of the other?
Actually, I have another video that's called Voter Fraud versus Voter Suppression. That was what was played on the Democracy Now! Program yesterday. And look, voter fraud is a bullshit claim by usually the GOP, by right-wing candidates. And it's about individual voters, stealing extra votes, voting from out of state, all this nonsense. So, for example, the guy that's been played as a hero, Brad Raffensperger, this character, the Secretary of State, who's, supposedly, he stood up to Donald Trump, by the way, for an important reason. You see how close this race was. If he had thrown out the Biden votes, remember, several 100,000 Georgians voted for Joe Biden, but still voted for their candidates for Senate in November. If he'd have thrown out their votes, the Senate race would have been over on the spot. Those people would be angry. They'd either not vote or they'd vote for the Democrats. So he knew that. So they had to make a choice between trying to save the Senate or saving Donald Trump, which is a lost cause, So some of the things you just heard from by the way, that was Professor Barbara Arnwine of Columbia University, who's down on the streets, horrified that they closed six polling stations in Cobb County. Now, this is a county with 500,000 voters. They only had 11 polling stations for early voting in the first place in the general. Biden still swept the county, even though this is Newt Gingrich's district, by the way. You have to understand how odd this is. And so they panicked. So they closed 6 of the 11 polling stations, everyone in black neighborhoods. Professor Arnwine is out there. She's furious. She went to court. She's doing all she can. She's also joined me in a federal lawsuit against the state of Georgia. That battle ain't over. Remember, we still have Brian Kemp, the Purgeon General of Georgia, is governor. Dangerous man. He made himself governor by stealing the vote back in 2018 from Stacey Abrams. So you have a massive purge of 198,000 voters illegally. You have poll closures. One thing that's not discussed here, when you say that Ossoff's ahead by just a few thousand votes, no, he ain't. There are tens of thousands, I want to repeat that, tens of thousands of people who try to vote and were turned away because they were purged or they challenged their signatures, you name it. There's also a pile of thousands of absentee ballots which have been disqualified on cockamamie grounds. I was with 3 voters who were about to put their ballots in drop boxes, absentee ballots in drop boxes. 2 of the 3 did not include their return addresses. Those votes will not be counted. In addition, we have thousands of provisional ballots, these second-class, back-of-the-bus ballots, which are handed out almost exclusively to black and young voters, almost exclusively. When someone says, oh, we don't like your signature, we don't like your ID, you're no longer listed as living in Atlanta, and they stop them from voting, they say, oh, here, get this provisional ballot. It's like a placebo ballot. You think you voted. You fill out this form. People don't know that those ballots aren't getting counted. They don't have to count those ballots, and in most cases, they don't. If you include the absentee ballots which are rejected, the provisional ballots that are rejected, and add in the people who were told, just get the hell out of here because you're not registered here anymore, it wasn't a close race. It wasn't a close race at all. This was a blowout, but the official, and I'm putting in little air quotes, the official count is very, very close. And remember, there's going to be a recount. Look out for these characters. They play pretty nasty games. There will be a recount in one and probably both cases, because under Georgia law, if you're within 0.5%, there's a so-called recount where they look at the ballots again. And as you know, while they didn't even try very hard because they knew he couldn't win, but when they did a recount for Trump, they found thousands of ballots for him, found them. What Trump was calling Raffensperger about it is he didn't find enough. In other words, reject enough legitimate American ballots. So it's ugly, it's ugly, it's ugly. And we're not done with this fight.
You know what, Greg? Absolutely. And you've been on the front lines of that fight. I want to thank you for that. Really, just over the years, exposing so much of the voter suppression tactics that have happened in states like Georgia. And very important to note that while Democrats like John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock have actually beat that active voter suppression, it doesn't mean that that voter suppression doesn't exist. But I'll note John Ossoff, the first millennial U.S. senator, Reverend Warnock, the first black senator from Georgia. Some progress was made, and appreciate your work to expose the blowback, the difficulty that we have to have real free and fair elections in the United States. So,
I gotta
Greg,
tell
where can people support you and find more, learn more about this work and learn more about your journalism?
Well, the best way to get a hold of me and find my stuff is at gregpalast.com. That's GREGPALAST, gregpalast.com. And yeah, we have a foundation. Our work is supported by your generous donations, but I'm not here to make a pitch for the money. I'm here to make a pitch for you to get that information and send it out. You know, I remember, Alex, back in 2008 when Obama won, a professor at the political center at the University of Minnesota said, there won't be another Republican elected to the White House for 2 generations. The demographics are just clear. There's a demographic tide as there is in Georgia, but I'm going to tell you this. Then we ended up with Donald Trump. Trump stole it. I have a book out called How Trump Stole 2020. You know, he came within 43,000 votes out of 175 million. 43,000 votes stopped Trump from re-election, from stealing the election. Okay, stealing the election. So don't assume that Jim Crow is dead. He's quite alive, except they don't call him, he's not Jim Crow anymore. He's Dr. James Crow, database analyst. Look out. This game ain't over. And I'm telling you, I have a message for my old friend, and I got to tell you, I've never talked about this, my old friend John Ossoff from London, because we both worked for BBC television. John, you owe the American people for putting you there. And Dr. Reverend Warnock, you owe the American people. I'm the first person that ever put you on national TV, doctor, and now senator. You owe us. It was very easy for the House to pass H.R. 1 knowing it would die in the Senate. Don't back off. You owe the American people. Right now, you change those laws, you get rid of Jim Crow. Don't get cold feet. You owe us. I'm going to hold their feet to the fire. I will stay on top of them as much as I've stayed on top of Donald Trump and his Jim Crow minions.
Hey, cheers to that, Greg, and I'll be doing the same right here on the AM Report. I really appreciate you coming on this morning, and thank you for your work. GregPalace.com if you want to learn more. Thank you, Greg.
You're very welcome, Alex. Catch you later.
This has been the AM Report, Perhaps News, the network of now. We're live every weekday morning with all of your quick political news and headlines to get your day started right. If you like this journalism, if you like this content, please consider subscribing or sponsoring it. You can do that at haps.tv/@Alex, and you can become a recurring sponsor. You can buy me a cup of coffee if you like, or you can just subscribe and you can get notifications every morning when we go live. I want to thank everyone who's joining and commenting. Shivani, thank you. We love Shivani Prasad. Check out her show, the comment section. Reddit commenter, $2,000 stimulus check. Come to Papa. Mitch, better have my money. Pay me what you owe me. But not for much longer. Say it with me, everyone. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Thank you guys for joining this morning. We'll be back tomorrow morning, and have a great Wednesday, and stay safe out there. Bye-bye.